You know, in hindsight, I think I need to make that a smidge longer. It's good, but it's like I'm trying to add that little soft buffer in the beginning of the stream. 30 seconds probably just isn't enough.
I mean, maybe a minute, but short and sweet's fine by me.
Yeah, true. Gets things going. Anyway, how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome back. Another episode of ReelNorthernBass Talk. And this night, we are joined by Jody White, the New England Hammer. Not even New England. You have won in a great number of places, sir. And back-to-back tournaments with dirty 30s, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I mean, I had help.
True, but back-to-back dirty 30s in two different states is a hell of an accomplishment.
Yeah, no doubt. They are biting good. It's my favorite time of the year to fish.
I tell you what, that second event where you got was it 31 or was it just shy of 30?
So I thought it was 30.98. I think they wrote down 30.97. So okay. Pretty high 30. Let's say.
I like that lake a lot. I went there a couple of times this year. Went for the first time last year and thoroughly impressed. And the last time we went, Andrew and I took my son and Andrew's nephew, and Andrew and I collectively only caught 5 fish, but I'm trying to think. And then Andrew's nephew caught 2, and he caught one of those that he did land was enough to help us get 20 pounds even or best 5. So we've got a pretty good streak there. 3 consecutive trips. Wait, is that true? Yeah, 3 consecutive trips for me with a 20-pound or better bag, which it's not a dirty 30, but goes to show how good that lake can be.
Not bad. Yeah, it's a cool lake. I had never been before. Tom's been there, a bunch. He put the time in. But it'll definitely be cool to go back sometime for sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, I might have set the bar too high to go back and do better. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, that's true. That's going to be hard to beat. I mean, Jesus, even trying to get a dirty 30 here in New England in general is not easy. You know that better than most. It's not easy. So when you get it, that's pretty goddamn impressive.
Yeah, it doesn't happen much, that's for sure.
Nope, you got to go just out of New England and include the greater Northeast to go to New York to make that become a little bit more of a consistent reality. But
yeah, I mean, I'm of the opinion the Great Lakes don't count. They are ridiculous in so many ways. They're wonderful to fish. I'd fish it every day of my life if I could, but it's definitely a different level out there.
So for this is the 5th consecutive season I've been running like just a top 5 largies, top 5 smallies for me and just a handful of friends. And because I got curious, I'm like, what were my 5 biggest for the year? So we just started it, and I tell friends, and like, oh, I'd love to do that. I'm like, all right, just start sending me your fish. I'll track it for you. And it's just in a Google spreadsheet. And so my top 5 smallies for the year, 34 pounds and change, I forget. And they all came from 3 days on Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River in May. I had 2 7s, 3 over 6, no 2 over 6, and I had 2 that were 5 pounds 15 ounces, which was awesome, but also really bothered me still too, because I was like, why couldn't you at least just been
you had 5s in there? Yeah. That's bananas that you've caught 2 7s. I haven't fished out there as much as I want to or would like to, but I've still never caught a 7-pound smallmouth. It's definitely on the hit list.
So the first time I went was in 2019. That's all I could think about. I was like, dude, I'm going to get a 7. And it wasn't until this year I didn't even catch a 5-pounder up there. In 2019 and 2020, we did 2 9-day trips. And then 2021 and 2022, I did 2-day trips with Tom, Smallmouth Freaks, going up with him. And in all those trips, I'd never once even caught one over 5 pounds. And I'm like, okay, I guess it's just never going to happen. And I get a chance to go up there with him again this spring, and literally first cast 7-pound, 5-ounce smallmouth. I'm like, okay. And I still, at that point, had not caught a 6-pound smallmouth. I got a 5.76 just the day before, like maybe 16 hours before that 7. And I'm like, oh, okay, awesome. I knew new PB, but it's still not a 6. Like, what the crap? What do I got to do?
Skipped 6?
I skipped 6. I went almost 2 pounds increase. No, 1.5 pounds. I skipped right over 6.
I have a buddy who's been he lives in Florida. He's wanted to catch a 10-pound largemouth forever. And he skipped it. He went straight to like 11 and a half this summer.
Oh God.
Punching. And I was like, God, it's amazing. Yeah, dude, skipping levels is great. Highly recommend it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know that I've ever done it, but I love it. I love it in theory.
I was absolutely stoked. But with that running list, my buddy Dennis, who's been doing the streams with me, but now he's out for the rest of the year while he's got just a crazy work schedule. We were talking about a couple weeks ago, and he was like, you shut the hell up. You went to the St. Lawrence Lake, Ontario. That doesn't count. Like, it's fair.
It's a different animal. But I mean, we have a lot of lakes around here that are, on varying levels of different animals. But
yeah,
out there, as far as like just the sheer quantity of like huge fish, you can't really touch it with our local places, unfortunately.
No. Maybe when the gobies get into Champlain in numbers, which I know is a matter of when, not if. But
probably. And I know I love a big fish. I would rather they stay out. I think I like the variety.
yeah,
but
yeah,
it's not. I guess fishing the St. Lawrence, fishing Oneida, those are still very different experiences. I guess Champlain probably would be an additionally different experience with gobies, but I don't know. Right now, it's a pretty cool place.
It is. I like the fact that in the same patch of grass, you can catch a 4-pound smallie and a 5-pound largie in back-to-back casts. And if the gobies come in there's a good chance that goes away. And the smallies do the same thing they've been doing in the St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario and everywhere else the goby invasion came in. You go from being able to catch smallmouth 1,000 different ways to drop shot, tube, swim bait, drag everything on the bottom. Oh, never.
Yeah, the sort of counter to that, and this is totally theoretical, right? But the counter is like Cayuga, right? Where you have a fishery that's, first of all, kicking out bigger fish than like basically anywhere. And then also, you catch them, as far as I can tell, like a kind of wide variety of ways, especially throughout the year. So I don't know. And I don't know that we want Champlain to turn into Cayuga, because right now at Champlain you can go out and catch like a number of 3-pound smallmouth and have a nice time. And Cayuga, like sometimes guys don't catch any or catch 3 or whatever. Like I don't think it's an easy place to fish except like in the spring, basically. But it's like maybe the counter to it's all going to be exactly the same like we see some of these other places.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
doesn't change. Oneida with gobies, it's not what it used to be. With Champlain, I'm sure wouldn't be what it used to be, but there is still like a decent amount of diversity there. Like just last year, I won an ABA, and like I think probably for half the day I was carrying around like 3 fish I caught on a topwater, and one of them stayed in the bag the whole day. And so like you can have some interesting things happen there. I don't know. It's very theoretical at this point.
Yes, it is. I am curious to see what that change will come across, because they've made it pretty clear that people that are navigating or monitoring that waterway, the canal that connects from Champlain to the St. Lawrence, where they keep saying that it's not a matter of when, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they are going to get in here, and eventually it's going to happen. And I'm just curious to see what it'll do for the fishery. I don't know. Time will tell. Either way.
If it happens the way, in theory, the scientists say it's going to happen, it'll come in from Thai, because they're in the Hudson and the Mohawk, and they're going to come theoretically up, I guess, down the Champlain Canal, like in by Whitehall. And okay. It would, because I don't think they're coming up the Richelieu. Like I feel like that would have happened already. So, which is the river on the north end of Champlain. So, in theory, like the lake could get this injection of really delicious forage at a really weird location.
That's true.
So it would be, and I don't know if a lot of people have necessarily thought about that. I think when people imagine Champlain with gobies, they sort of just imagine bigger fish in the same places they already are, whereas it could really like change the dynamic for a while because it's a really big lake. But we have no idea what's going to happen. So,
yeah, true. I will say I don't remember. I know the saltwater version is called a sculpin, and I don't remember that's the same name for the freshwater version. New Hampshire
it
has
is.
them. They look very similar to a goby.
Yeah.
And there is still a chance it could have been that. But 2 years ago, Andrew and I were fishing up inland sea, and we caught decent smallmouth, came up, coughed up what we were positive was a goby. And we were pretty far north of the inland sea. So not to say it still couldn't have come in from the southern end and make it all the way up there. Unlikely, but not impossible. That was 2 years ago. So I don't know. I
put it up there too.
Then there's that. Yeah, who knows
Did
what?
you like get it in your hand and take a picture?
Yeah, I have it somewhere. I can go back and find it.
I'm curious
because I know I sent it to Tom, and I'm like, "What do you think?" He's like, "Oh yeah." It's like, All right, I'll try and find it and send it to you after this.
I'm all ears now.
So, all right. Anyway, that was a good discussion, but we're already 10 minutes in. Let's get to the heart of this. Let's talk Alabama rigs. Before we get started, for everybody that is here already, thank you very much. We appreciate you guys as always. Do us a favor, drop a like, please, whether you're watching here on YouTube or on Facebook. Doesn't matter. It helps all the same. Greatly appreciate it. Everybody who shared the stream before and maybe do so after, also appreciate you for doing that as well. And Jody, we kind of just jumped into a conversation, which is always fun, but we kind of skipped over a formal introduction of you. So if you want to take a minute, talk a little bit about yourself, your history, and maybe a quick plug your social medias, by all means, dude, the floor is yours.
I'm Jody White. I live in Vermont. I work for MLF, used to work for FLW. So I've been sort of in and around tournament fishing for a pretty big chunk of my life. And it's also what I do in my spare time, pretty much. And so I fish around, here a lot, mostly because it's the best place in the world to fish. And, I lived in Kentucky for a while, and I lived in Minnesota for a little bit and all that. But this is home. And when I'm at work, I'm watching people fish, which is fantastic. And I guess that's pretty much the main deal. Been fishing a lot the last few years. It's been really good. And my socials are just Jody Blanco, sort of across the board. And realistically, it's pretty much only on Instagram.
Yeah, there you go. Easy peasy.
So, yeah.
All right. You know what? I mean to ask you, with your job, how much of the year do you work? And I don't want to say that like, oh my God, he's always got this time off, but like how much of it is like actual core work where you're like outright busy?
When I'm at tournaments, I'm like flat out busy, right?
Yeah.
When I'm at a tournament, I'm, I wake up at 4, like I'm at the ramp before most of the anglers, and then I'm usually like done with work after most of the people fishing it are done retying and stuff like that, right? Like it's a super full day. It's the whole thing. And I probably travel like 12 or 15 times a year. And then I do a lot of back end stuff for other tournaments that I'm not actually at. And so some of that is an all day thing. Some of that is I dip in and watch weigh in the afternoon and then write for a couple hours or something like that. I definitely have a lot of flexibility in my schedule, and I've been working at, FLW and then I guess now MLF, I've been there for like 10 years now. So I have or I guess more than 10 years. So I have a little bit of additional flexibility built in. Like there's some times where it's like, I'm piecing out this weekend. I want to go fish this. So I really am really fortunate that nobody has said, hey, Jody, you have to go work more. And I'm really happy with how much I work. I guess if that makes sense. The downside is there's some stuff that's not flexible, right? Like there are tournaments around here I would love to fish, and I'm not going to fish them. The ABA 2-day next year is at Cayuga in the fall or in like September. It'd be awesome. I bet that thing would take 25 a day to win. All I want to do is go to Cayuga and idle it for like 3 days this spring before there's any grass, right? Like I want to fish that tournament and get ready for it. But I'm going to be at the Mississippi River for the Invitationals Championship. And that's pretty much where I'm going to be. There's no way around it. So there's stuff that is just non-negotiable. And that's just kind of life when you're following tournament fishing. And unfortunately, not every tournament schedule works with every work schedule or whatever, but I try to get my licks in when I can. And honestly, like the fall is usually when I get the most time to fish because our schedule relaxes and, half of the other people in the company get in the woods and, deer hunt. And, some people, I guess, have families and things, and then I just go fish. So it definitely depends. I really am fortunate to have a job that gives me the flexibility that I've got for sure.
Yeah.
I can't think of not that I've like really tried to look for other work very hard, but I can't really figure out too many things that would let me fish more than I do, especially considering that I'm up north and our schedule is so concentrated in the winter and early spring before our season, like our tournament season, really gets into gear, which
Right.
helps me a lot. Like as summer goes, because summer and fall for me are pretty hot and heavy up north, but there's just little kind of snippets of tournaments that time of year. Whereas, we have like, it feels like 2 tournaments a week from, middle of February through May or whatever.
No, that's the perks of not only having that seniority for being there so long, but also being good at what you do. You're afforded a lot more flexibility than otherwise. So I feel for this with Tom. Being an engineer sure doesn't let me fish as much as I want. Buddy, you are not kidding. I've been a mechanical design engineer for the majority of my career. I was an engineering supervisor for 3.5 years, and then I've been in sales and most recently promoted to project manager. There's no time. There's no time afforded for those fun things. And actually, I was planning on giving the ABA Professional League a shot for 2025. Either that or the Top 150 Solo Series. Either one, just because I was like, you know what? I can make that work. And then some things happen to work where vacation time is being ripped. So that is no longer an opportunity for me. So this is going to be back-to-back years where my company has made decisions that have directly impacted my ability to chase my fishing dream, which is just unfortunate.
You should try to get worse at your job, and you might be less necessary.
I've been thinking about that a lot. If I had just learned to shut my mouth and not prove my versatility as an engineer and a leader, and just being very well organized, it's what happens. Open your mouth and people are like, "Oh, you can do a lot more. Here you go." Lesson learned. Next time, I'll just pretend I'm really dumb. Get my foot in the door and be like, I don't know how to do that. I know how to do just this one thing. Oh, all right. Let us get into the Alabama rig discussion. So, Alabama rigs. There are a lot of questions I always get on this in particular when we get to this time of the year, because right about now is when this starts to pan out really, really well for me. I would say very tail end of the year, and then early spring, like on kind of, I want to say like high 40s to like mid to upper 50s. Like basically, I would even say mid to upper 40s right until spawn. And then a little bit after post spawn too does well. And then there's a big stretch in the summer where I have not been able to figure it out, but then it does well. And I was hoping that we could talk about this a little bit and share at least some insight to people on this topic, because it's not a small thing. It's kind of like getting into glide bait fishing almost in the sense, because it's just a lot going on. Kind of like a big glide where it's someone's like, oh yeah, throw a 10-inch glide. And you look at it like, how the friggin' hell am I supposed to adjust all my finesse traditional fishing to something that giant? And to me, this almost fits in that same kind of category because it's just so damn big and wildly different from all of your other traditional tackle. So that is the idea behind what we're going to try and do tonight. So while you guys are watching and listening, please leave any questions in the chat and we will get to them. I did see one that already started, but I'm going to sit on that for a little bit because it had to do with regulations, and we will touch upon that because it varies from state to state. And no matter where you live, anywhere in the country where you'd want to go fish this, you got to check your own state rules, because they're either explicitly clear on it or they are very vague on it. And it's going to be up to you to either make sure you're understanding what you're reading or make necessary phone calls to your local fishing game or, your state fishing game department to get clarification on the matter. But I can at least touch upon that a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about this. Jody, let's begin this from a beginner's perspective. If you were in a nutshell, what are you going to say is like ideal timing to be throwing an Alabama rig, water temperature wise, and then I would say conditions following that?
I think I think it's, I don't want to make it harder than it is or like broader than it is, because in theory we're trying to do this in a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But like, there are anglers that have figured out how to apply an umbrella rig literally at all times of the year, right? You know, Casey Martin caught 100 pounds on Chickamauga in June. That's post spawn, right? There were moments this summer on Champlain in like August where I caught the crap out of him on an umbrella rig. Um, and then it's also a killer bait like early in the year. It seems like up north we have a more limited window of early in the year because I feel like a lot of our fish jump really shallow really fast and kind of get out of that desired range of the umbrella rig.
Agreed on
Um,
that.
and then not that the range is as narrow as we think it might be, but I guess if there's an ideal time, it's probably the fall. It's probably fishing, 15 to 8 feet of water, and maybe just as long as the water temperature is dropping, down to, let's say, maybe mid 40s, upper 40s. I don't think to me, it's not a great vertical bait. And as you get more and more into the winter, like true winter, you end up fishing closer and closer to vertical. So I feel like for me anyway, if there's a prime time, it's, let's say in the waters in the 50s and you're trying to fish kind of, or 50s or low 60s and trying to fish mid depth, like really it's kind of just like maybe a occasionally more attractive single swim bait. And some days the fish really want that, and some days maybe they don't.
Yeah. No, very well
I don't know.
said.
It's a lot there right there, but it's one thing that I've been bummed about by the umbrella rig is it's not allowed at the upper levels of so many tournament organizations. And I would love to watch pros use it because I think you can learn so much from watching tournaments and seeing what happens, you know, with guys at the absolute top level. And we don't get to see that, which it's a bummer for me, but it does mean if you can figure something out, you can have it to yourself more than anyone ever normally would have, because it's not going to get blown up on live by accident. So that's an extra bonus there, I suppose, if you can dial it in.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. And it is interesting that they just outright banned it. Like when I can't remember what video it was, but all of a sudden guy goes out there. What was this? 2011, 2012, roughly somewhere around there, when like guy posts a video and he's like, oh, you got to check out the umbrella rig for bass fishing. And he catches like 3 on a single cast. And then he catches 4 and then he catches 5. Then everybody's like, oh my God, this is just ridiculous. You can't be fishing like this. And bass just outright, you know what? We're going to ban it. It's not allowed. We're not going to have this. It's just not in the sport of fishing, blah, blah, blah. Where they could have made, a balanced restriction to it, kind of like we have in Vermont and other neighboring states where, okay, yeah, you can use it, but our state only says 2 hooks per line, so you can only use 2 hooks on it. Like that would have been kind of cool to see if they at least came to a compromise on it. But no, they just outright were like, no, not allowed.
Yeah, and we had it on the FLW tour for a very little bit, and it was like a pretty dominant bait for a little bit. But if anything, we've learned, the last few years, and especially with live scope, that like it's a bait that fish can absolutely not bite. Like I can show you fish that will not eat an umbrella rig easy as pie, and then I can catch them on something else. And so it's one of those things where it's I do feel like the bass fishing world as a whole overreacted to it out of the gate, and it was incredible. When Paul Elias was crushing them on Gunnersville, I literally was like trying to order one online during the tournament. It was all anyone cared about. This was in college, right? Like it was the craziest thing of all time. And then it turned out to not matter nearly as much as you would have thought from that one tournament, where you thought it changed bass fishing forever. And it's a really good bait, but it's not the end of the world.
No, wholeheartedly agreed. And to your point at the end of your explanation, I think you hit it perfect, where, there's only so much that you can do to really explain the pros and cons of it, but, really where it can be effective without having a little bit more a little bit more details. to what that question, it's like anything. Like people ask me, what's the best time of the year to throw a jig? I was like, oh, Jesus. Well, what are you trying to do? You fishing deep? You want to fish grass? You want to fish rock? You going smallmouth, largemouth? Like, what? Give me more details here. I can't narrow down something that I know so much about into just a broad general answer. You got to give me more specifics, and I can dial that in really, really well. And Alabama rig, it's no different. I would say it's probably not as expansive in its use as other baits, but still expansive enough that you're right. Trying to nail down something broad is difficult.
To me, there's kind of like two main things you do with it. And one of them is like just pretty obvious, right? It's like you're target fishing. It's a boulder, it's a piece of wood, it could be a current situation, right? Like a really specific like break or something like that. And it's a really good target bait because it's looks like pretty dramatically different from other stuff. You can see it on scope really well, so you can weight it such that like you can keep it up or down, like you can put it where you need to put it pretty effectively. And then the other thing is like just to legitimately cover a lot of water, and you don't need scope for that. It's nice, but you can with an A rig, you can, run down a whole break line faster than like more effectively than you could go down that break line and more quickly than, almost anything else. Especially if they want the A rig, right? Like Oneida is a killer umbrella rig lake, and you can roll down a grass edge with that thing in a little bit of chop like that. And you could even like cover a flat or something like up on Ontario and stuff like that. Like you can throw an A rig over a flat, like for sure, and they can see it from a long way away, and they will come and get it if they want it. So I think it's super effective just for covering water, just like you would like fan casting any other thing you wanted to fan cast. But it's also a really, really good, I've got one or two casts that I need to make where I expect there to be fish, and it's great for that under certain circumstances as well.
Yep, completely agreed. And it's funny you bring up Ontario because when we were out there for the Rumble on the River tournament last weekend, weekend before, and we were in an area, it's going a little slow, and we get a couple fish and slow down a little bit. And Tom's like, man, they still got to be here. I'm gonna throw that A rig out and just see if like maybe they're hunkered down right now because the wind has slicked off a little bit. And he's like, I'm pretty sure they're still here, but I got to call them out. And using it akin to the same as a big glide bait, like rarely get bit on a big glide bait, but boy, oh boy, does it pull them out of the structure they're hiding in. They just cannot help themselves. And A rig is almost, I wouldn't even want to say it's almost as good as a glide bait in its calling out ability, but it's relatively close. And yeah, just doing that, just staring at scope, fan casting like a madman. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, yep, no, never mind, they're still here. And you only end up getting one on it the whole day, but it was, it's great search bait, cover water a lot of really fast, and it's just there's enough there that 90% of the fish you go by aren't going to bite it, but they'll still come up and take a quick look, and that is more helpful than not in a lot of cases.
And on the right days, they will bite it. Like I think it is a really conditional bait. I think that one of the best things with any bigger bait, and it's not, it's sort of big, sort of not big, kind of depends. It depends on a lot of things.
Yeah.
But, it is a really good bait to like actually convert on. Like when they really want it. And when they really want it, I would say it's generally speaking, like when there's wind. Like,
yes,
it is a great thing to do with the umbrella rig is to put it down when it's calm.
Yeah.
Like if you can adjust to those conditions correctly, I think that puts you a long way ahead.
Yeah. So it is funny you bring that up because we were out on Lake Champlain. Was that last year? Yeah, it was last year in May. And it was dead calm. Weren't getting bites, even in areas with current that we had been getting bites on it before. They just weren't doing it. And then third day we're out there. The wind picked up like a bastard. And we got around one point where we were kind of out of the wind, but it was pulling a lot of current around the point into an area that just had a slight chop. And I'm like, I'm going to pick it back up again. And we absolutely waxed them. Then we went to a spot that had both high current and the wind pulling through it. And it was about one of the most fun days of the A rig I've ever had. It it was dumb how many fish we caught on that. And man, when they hit it too, I think it's probably one of the things we really should talk about really quick is that's got to be one of the most fun bites. There's a lot of things I like catching a lot of fish on, but the violence of an A-rig bite is second to none. Even like a 1.5 pound smallie, when it hits it, you think you got like a 4.
It's a really, really good bite. Smallmouth are like, they're meaner about it too than largemouth by like a wide margin. I mean, I've caught probably more largemouth on an umbrella rig than smallmouth, all things considered. But smallmouth, like they try to take the rod out of your hands most times, and it's pretty fun. The downside of smallmouth is they absolutely mangle rigs, which is like kind of a bummer.
Yeah, because it's not cheap for the rig, and it's a pain in the ass when you're going to re-rig it, depending upon what hooks you're using. If you got to re-glue your bait, one bite from a really insane smallmouth will rip the bait right off. So you're going, flying through baits, even if they miss it sometimes. But yeah, you're right. Like all the largemouth bites I've gotten on it, kind of like a spinnerbait bite, really. Like it's still a violent bite, but it's like just a kind of like a solid thump. But you're right, smallmouth, when they hit it, it feels like the rod's going the other way on, you hooked onto the back of a truck that's going down the highway. It doesn't just stop, it stops and goes backwards on you real fast.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'm just curious, spitballing. What are the biggest smallmouth and largemouth you've caught on it?
I caught a 6-pound smallmouth on it, fishing with Casey Smith. I don't remember how big it was, exact. Like I know it was a 6 because I was like stoked to have caught a 6. I think it was one of the first ones I've caught. And then I know I've caught 6-pound largemouth on it. I think actually maybe the first fish I ever caught on an umbrella rig, like literally back in the braid days, was a 6-pound largemouth on Claytor Lake. So, but I don't think I've ever caught like a 7 or anything like crazy huge on one.
That's I'm trying to think. I don't even have.
But like I've caught good fish on it. I think that it does seem to me that maybe these days, like the absolute top class of fish is a little bit wise to it. I'm not, but I do need a little more data on that. But like, it doesn't mean it's not a good tournament bait or a good bait to use. Like maybe if your entire life goal is to catch a state record, maybe that's not the one you want to throw all the time. But if you're trying to have a good time, it's a great bait to still use.
Yeah, I concur with that. Yeah, I can't even like. So I do know Tom caught a 7 something on it 2 years ago. They had 29.7 something pounds on their best 5, and
that's very good.
You know where it is. And he caught an 8 on it too. I think one of the 2 8+ pound largies he's got has gone on an A rig. But for me, yeah, I think I've got a 4-pound largie on it, but I've got quite a few 4-pound smallmouth on it. That's probably my favorite thing. Would I like to catch a 6-pound largie on it? Yes. I would much rather catch 4+ pound smallies on it because those are fun. 6-pound large.
I mean, I'll catch whatever bites. I don't discriminate.
Okay,
whatever's biting best is what I want to catch that day.
Yeah. Let's get into a little bit more specifics on this then really quick. Before we do that, holy hell, Grat, thank you very much for the donation, sir. Greatly appreciate it. It's been a minute since we got a donation, but going to put that to good use, put it back into the channel. So again, thank you very much, man. Appreciate it. Let's get to the specifics a little bit more on this and start throwing out until we get some more questions going. Let's choose these specific situations for this. So you had mentioned like 8 to 15 feet for kind of an ideal depth for just generally speaking, what's good for an A-rig. Right about now, let's say starting today until the water hits mid 40s and that bite kind of disappears. Because I agree, that's about the coldest I've been able to get it to work. How deep have you consistently been able to get fish on this?
I mean, I would say it varies dramatically on the lake, right? Like, I think at Oneida, you're pretty rarely fishing much deeper than like 15 or so, right?
Yep.
And then, not that you can't, there's some stuff deeper, but to me, I don't fish that much deeper that often. you know, Champlain like is actually a pretty good umbrella rig lake, and it's gonna stay good pretty shallow, I would say, probably until December. Like you can probably catch a lot of fish in less than 10 feet of water on Champlain right now, maybe less than 15. Uh, and a lot of the reason I don't throw an A rig super deep is just because it's not very efficient to get it down there and to move it back. Like it's you're not covering water like as quickly as you could be or as easily as you could be, and that's why it's like a more specialized zone, so to speak, right?
Yep.
But I'd say not. I mean, you can catch them down to 20 for sure right now, or 25 if you've got a good rock down there.
Yep.
I think a lot depends on what you're trying to do, where you're at.
So I agree. I will say the deepest I've consistently caught fish on it was 38 feet. And that was on Champlain in December of last year. And we were up in Mallets, and everybody knows about all those community umps out there. And we were just working off of one, and I could see them on scope, and they were just behaving strangely. That they weren't hitting, they weren't hitting a drop shot, they weren't hitting a Ned rig. I get them onto Demiki, dragging swim baits, bombing them past them, dragging them up and over the knuckle, kind of where they're hanging out. But it's still like nothing was like, okay, that's the answer. That's what they want. And I had the A-rig tied on. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to try it. I ended up changing a little bit because I usually go 3 1/8 heads and then 2 3/8 heads. Because I do like trying to fish it more in that like 15 to 20 foot range myself. But I was like, I'm going to go 3/4 ounces and 2 3/8 because I got to get it down into like 42-ish feet and come up where that knuckle was at like 38. And every time, like we got it all the way down to the bottom and we got about 5 feet off the bottom, all of a sudden appeared out of nowhere. They were hitting way off the edge. We're like, okay, here we go. And half of them were hitting it before we even got to that knuckle, and the rest of them, you could see them like they'd kind of follow it right to the knuckle, or all of a sudden one would appear on the knuckle. And as soon as you rolled it right over the top, and we're keeping this thing like maybe 2 feet off the bottom, just following the contour the whole way up, slow rolling the hell out of it. And as soon as you got past that knuckle, whatever didn't bite it down below would hit it right after it came over the crest. And that was fun, but that was kind of an exception. Just it worked well for those conditions. Like you can see them trying all the usual things that would normally work. And yeah, they were working, but not consistently. You get 1 or 2 here and then switch something else, get 1 or 2 and keep switching. It's like, okay, something's got to give. But then that A-rig was like, that was the day where it's like, that's the day that this worked really, really well. That set them apart. It's just the way that they were staged. Must have been the way they were staged around all the bait fish that were around. It just made sense for those particular conditions. And we waxed them. It was amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, you never know. Like maybe the next day you would have caught those fish really good on a football jig or really good on a single swim bait, right?
Yep.
Or blade bait or something, right? But, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the umbrella rig is there are days and there are like particular fish and just particular situations where sometimes you're really missing out not having it tied on, not having it ready. And I wish I should keep it tied on and ready more. It's just very inconvenient to do.
Oh yeah.
But it can be a really extraordinary bait. Like I would say there's not really any downside to trying to fold it into your fishing a little bit more often, because when you hit with it, a lot of times you hit pretty big.
Oh yeah. So I've got 4 swim bait rods, and they all kind of trade places what they're doing between either big soft body swim baits or multi-piece crankdowns or my giant glides or mid-sized glides, whatever. But I have one rod in particular that's my Douglas 805F, so 8-foot heavy fast rod, and it's got how does that have the Defiant 23.6 pound soft casting fluoro. And I really like that setup for a number of things, but I really like it for my A-rig. So right now, like literally for the last 3 weeks, that rod has had an A-rig on it this entire time. And it's going to stay on there until we get to the end of December. And no, I take that back. It's going to stay on there until probably middle of January, because I'll go down and I'll go for those, winter holdover stripers. And I'll still just use the same damn thing. I'll just change out the color of the baits and the hooks that I'm using down in Connecticut for that. And it's just a blast. And then usually by the time I'm done there, it's like, okay, now I'm done. But I got like close to a 2.5 month solid window where it's it's like towing the line of panning out and to where it's just working really well and then just kind of peters out. And I use it for cleanup duty on the stripers, which is just a boatload of fun. But yeah, no, I as much of a pain in the ass it is to constantly keep it rigged and have to constantly retie it and get new baits on it and keep everything fresh. And the hassle of it just being in the boat because I haven't figured out a good method for wrangling all of the wires together so they don't hook on everything. It's still worth it for me just to always keep it on there.
Yeah. Probably the best thing that I've found, I don't have one here. The best thing I found to like store them is like sort of a Tupperware type situation, right?
Yep.
And then they make these, they're called like gear ties. They're like basically like a bread tie, like a rubber coated cable that's like about yay long, right?
Yep.
And you can get it at Home Depot or whatever. And you can just do like a couple of wraps of those things around it and it slumps it all back together and you can chunk them in there. And you still end up with the issue of like, if you don't keep them real fresh or take all the baits off, which it's annoying to take all the baits off, you end up with rust, you end up with stuff getting all crusty and bad. But that little, those gear ties are pretty clutch for a storage situation if you can stay dialed on it, which I can't always do because I'm bad at certain aspects of organization. But if you're good at it and you're looking for a solution, that might be it.
All right, I'll have to take a look at that. We actually do have a few questions in here. Hang on. Nope, I want to go back. I want to grab this one too. All right, so one of the questions that we have that I get all the time is, dude, you can't throw that in New Hampshire. Like, what are the regulations on it? Before I say anything, because there's two questions here, I'll address both at the same time. I implore you to do your own research on this because it does vary from state to state and even from body of water to body of water. Case in point, for Lake Champlain, right? It's in both Vermont and New York. Vermont, you are allowed to use 2 hooks and the rest have to be dummies. I have heard that the other 3 dummies have to be like truly dummies. Like it can't even be a jig head. It's got to be basically like a screw lock that you screw onto a bait. But in my opinion, which is not the law, is as long as there is no hook point on it, it is considered a dummy. I have heard that is not the case. I don't know. I honestly don't care. I'm going to keep throwing it the way I do, and I'll just deal with the repercussions later. But you would think then you got New York where you're allowed to use 5 hooks, and the lake lays in both states. So what's the answer? Well, you have to go and look at, well, okay, what are the laws on Lake Champlain? Lake Champlain is governed by all of Vermont's fishing regulations. So even though in New York, yes, you can throw 5 hooks on Lake Champlain, even in New York waters, you cannot. That's why it's important you do your research. But so there was the first question from Dogbone. Can you fish an A-rig and Mass 2 hooks? Yes, you can. And yes, the answer is you can fish 2 hooks. I had it up here. Where did it go? Uh-oh. Where the hell did it go? I had it. I was looking at Massachusetts and their laws. Well, it's gone. Anyway, I read it and it said fishing prohibitions, or specifically prohibitions, more than 2 hooks. So you can have up to 2 hooks on it. New Hampshire, this one at least I do have at the ready. So I can read you the law, letter for letter. New Hampshire did used to have a web page dedicated specifically to saying Alabama rig is illegal. Umbrella rigs are illegal. They defined it as an apparatus, not a fishing lure. So it did not fall under their current fishing rules and regulations and laws and blah, blah, blah. That has since been scrubbed. It has disappeared. I have searched high and low for the last 2 years. That does not exist on the internet. The only thing that does exist on New Hampshire Fishing Game's website, while taking fish in open water, 2 hooks may be used for bait per line. One with a single hook point and the other with no more than 3 hook points, except for certain lake trout and salmon lakes where only a single hook with a single hook point may be used. So there's the devil in the details. Yes, you can use an Alabama rig with 2 hooks in New Hampshire. The rest have to be dummies, unless you are in a designated lake trout and or salmon lake. So that's why it's really important you guys got to do your own due diligence on this. They'll get you.
Yeah.
They'll get you on everything.
So, it sounds like 2 hooks is like a thing for a lot of people here, and it's the one that's least straightforward. What's your like typical 2 hook setup, if that makes sense? Because there's a lot of ways, there's a lot of configurations you could go with.
So I guess it would depend on what A rig you're getting and what you like to throw. And there's a whole bunch of different varieties out there. Some where all 5 arms are the exact same length, or there's a varying length on the middle attachment bar and how much longer it is compared to the other 4 arms. Somewhere like the back 3 are way longer than the top 2, yada yada. I have kept my A rig fishing extremely simple. I only fish the Yum Flash Mob Junior. So that is 5 arms. The middle arm is just a smidge longer than the other 4 arms. For the sake of simplicity in keeping it running straight and true, I do 2 hooks on the bottom. And that's because more often than not, I am trying to fish above the fish I'm targeting with an Alabama rig or an umbrella rig versus any other way I would try and tackle them. Like I'm trying to get it right in front of their face or above it. So in my head, they are more likely to attack the nearest bait out of that cluster you are presenting. So my bottom 2 always have my real hooks and the rest are dummies.
Yeah. And I think scope proves that true in a lot of times. Like you can run a pretty high bite percentage with 2 hooks with them being on the bottom. What I do usually is I'll shorten the middle arm. So I'm pulling that center bait even farther away from, what's this where it's going to show up? I'm pulling that center bait even farther away from my hooks, right? And keeping my hooks on my bottom arm. And then a lot of times, especially if I want to fish deeper or faster, like if I guess deeper or faster, right? A lot of times I will take my top arms and I'll just put blades on instead of dummies so that I am one, I don't really think more blades is a bad thing. It seems like fish like blades. And then 2, it's just one less thing that a fish can like bite and miss, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And it's really easy because blades don't ever come off. They're just on there. What I will also do though is if I'm not fishing, if I don't want to do blades for some reason, and I can't really think of why I wouldn't want to do blades right now, but let's maybe a scenario where I really wanted to fish a bait really shallow, right?
Yep.
I would cut the top arms to be shorter as well. And so I'll end up with basically 3 short arms with 3 dummies and then 2 longer arms with my actual hooks. I'm big into like, I will cut an A-rig apart, drop of a hat. Like,
yep.
I know that it's nice to keep them all together, but like at the end of the day, it's one bait and a smallmouth is going to destroy it in an hour anyway if it jumps. So like, I'll go ahead and cut them up. It's probably bad of me to say that, but like, it's just one bait.
No, it's, dude, I've pulled, I mean, granted, it's just a skirt, but nonetheless, like I've bought brand new jackhammers just to immediately rip the skirt off so I could play around with different swim bait trailers on the back just for a slightly different approach. And it's like, oh my God, that's sacrilege. Why would you immediately destroy a $16, $17 bait? Well, it's because I know it's going to work better in this way, or I'm just curious. I want to try and make it work. So I get it. Like, you got to tinker. You got to let your brain tell you what to do and just act on it, or you're never going to be able to scratch that itch, even if it is kind of expensive sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, the umbrellas are probably like, I would say the most cost effective, to be honest. I mean, and I have broken some arms off. I will say, I think that usually you're probably better off putting on a fresh, cheap umbrella rig than you are using an old, expensive umbrella rig. If, on Derby day, if that makes sense, right? Like, I think I would rather go through more cheap ones than be like, I got this one and it's going to last me forever, not that like the brown dog ones, which I mean, they're a great umbrella rig. They are like 2 or 3 times as expensive as a umbrella, but not that they're not a great bait. For me, especially with how much I cut things up and fish, New York versus Vermont versus wherever, I just go cheap because it's just easiest, to be honest. And I'll just keep an eye on it. If I catch one that goes crazy and I end up with wires all bent around, well, I'll just sit down the boat and redo one.
Yeah. It's just like anything else. It's the rule of one, you have none. For me, if I'm going out Alabama rig, I go up to Champlain in May every year. I might not this year, but instead I'm probably going to do the last week of the Canadian early season opener on St. Lawrence and Lake Ontario. I'm going up there with like 3 or 4 A-rigs, and I might not catch a single fish on it. But if you get into that bite, my God, you got to be ready, because like you said, you'll go through them in a real hurry, and it's kind of an expensive thing to carry multiples on. But you do the same thing with $25 friggin' Vision 110s, and it doesn't take much. You catch one really feisty, like mid 50-degree water temp smallmouth when they're like in their fighting prime, and they'll destroy an A-rig like real quick. Try to go bend an arm out, and it's like, okay, it came out of the head with a little bend and straight up, and now it's looks like one of those kinky straws you used to get as a little kid that's like twisted all over the place. How the hell did that happen? Can't straighten that out. Even if I do, I'm going to snap it. Alec had a really good question. I'll let you tackle this one. Yeah, I will let you tackle this one. Would like to know recommendations on swim bait heads you like on A-rigs. I've personally used Berkeley Fusion 19 head in the past.
I was just trying to find it. It seems like maybe they don't sell it on Tackle Warehouse, but I throw this one from Scottsboro a lot. It's like a Recon or something. It's got a stout hook in it. It's not their finesse one, and it's got and it also comes with a pretty small hook. And it has, like the beautiful thing, which is a screw lock. Now, There's a couple baits, like if you're going to throw like a diesel minnow, right, which is a really good, it's a really good umbrella rig bait, especially if you want stuff to last. Then you can't throw a screw lock. You got to throw something else. For that kind of stuff, I really like the VMC boxer heads. I think they make a nice, solid hook. They come in pretty good sizes, and they have a pretty good big keeper on them, which they're actually a pretty good umbrella rig head just in general. But for like stuff that I can screw on a screw lock, I really like that the one from Scottsboro. I don't know. It might be the one that comes in the package. It might just be something on their website. It's like a little bit stouter. You can get pretty small sizes. You can pretty lightweight. And like, I know Tim, who works there, who owns the place, and he sends me like these little plastic baggies of like 50 heads in them, and I'm like, yes, I'm set. And they're really good. And I've just used them a lot. Like, I've got a lot of confidence in them, right? That Beast Coast lead sled has a really similar hook. Like, it's definitely like in the right theory, but I just haven't folded it into my arsenal because I've caught so many fish on this thing.
So when when Beast Coast released the swim bait sled head, and I got some, and I was like, oh man, by the time I got the
swim bait sled, not lead sled.
Swim
Rangers are lead sleds.
Yeah.
Dang it.
He was like, I was like, I think I missed my like swim bait window, but I'll figure it out. I'll make these work. He was like, a couple of guys that were testing these said really good things about them as A-rig heads. And I was like, ooh, that's a really good point. So I can't remember what hooks I have on mine, right? Until I went to St. Lawrence, and going up there, I'm like, ooh, I got to put all new heads on these because I need 4 hooks, and only had 2. So I'm looking, and Tom's like, yeah, throw these weights. I'm like, okay. And white heads. I'm like, oh, the only thing I have are the swim bait sleds. Derek said those were good, and like those hooks on there, I'm pretty sure are still BKKs, and phenomenal company, phenomenal hooks. I rigged them on there and beyond happy with the way they just both swam and the ease of putting baits on there. That double wire keeper on there is awesome. You're still going to tear some baits eventually anyway, but it sure as hell beats trying to freaking glue them on there all the time. And not if you can't get a good hook like yours that has a really good screw keeper on there, then it's just you got to glue them on. The only other ones I've used that I really like are the new Defiant swim jig heads. They have a swim bait keeper on there, or a bait keeper, screw keeper on there, like the ones you had just showed, that even trying to thread on a 2.8 Kitech on there, it goes on extremely well. I would say that the hook shanks on them are a smidge shorter, So if you wanted to go with a lighter weight hook, but also try and throw like a 3.8-inch swim bait on there, I mean, yeah, you can do it, but you better hope they don't short strike it because there's not a lot of hook shank there for them to grab onto. But at least with those, it's kind of like a 90-degree line tie, but not really. I think it's more of like a 60-degree. It's just the way the head's poured. It's kind of hard to tell. But that screw lock, that bait keeper on there is wicked good. And those are extremely stout hooks too. And that's the thing I found with these. You got to have stout hooks on this because every bite is just violent. You put something like those Kitech, like tungsten resin ball jigs. Like those are great because they're easy to find everywhere and they're convenient, but they're not really a very stout hook.
Don't they?
They what?
They have like tiny baby hooks, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Hey, wait, if you get into like the 3/0 on say like a 3/8 ounce head, those aren't too bad. The ones on their football jigs are a little bit stouter, but yeah, if you're just looking at the ball jig ones and you want to go to like a 1/8 ounce head with a 1/0 hook, oh god no, you'll bend that thing right out in a heartbeat. Great if you want to throw like Demiki rig, like straight vertical fishing, then it's fine. You're gonna throw on a light line, but again, they're easy to find. The cost of them really isn't that bad, but they're not the right quality hook that I would ever trust on an A rig.
Yeah. And to Rich's question here, I know Angler Tungsten, I think it is, makes a screw lock swim bait head. It's called the Eclipse. I've got some. I don't think I would put it in an umbrella rigs category. Although I think I might have only the 2/0. But I also, for an umbrella rig, I personally, like, if I had my druthers, I prefer, I don't know, you're an engineer, 60, 30, whatever it is. Like, I kind of prefer a line tie that's like not, I guess, dead 90.
Yeah.
And like, I'd rather like try to get my, hook a little farther away. I don't know, a little farther back in the bait or whatever. It just feels, it's just something that I've done for a long time where it feels right for me doing that.
Yeah, and in theory, it's going to swim better because everything's much more in line versus if you're throwing something like, the swim bait sled from Beast Coast Fishing, kind of doesn't make sense, right? Because it's a 90-degree line tie, but it does still work, but it's not natural because you're coming out and then down to it and then out. It's not quite a straight line. So in theory, it could kind of ride up at an angle when you're swimming it. It probably does.
There are lots of good, plenty of fish have been caught on 90-degree jig heads. Yeah. I don't think it's something to be scared of. It's just like a thing that personally I'm just used to doing it the way I've done it. And it's not like some things I'm looking to change, right? This isn't one of them,
right. So actually that answers, we killed 2 questions there. Let's go back to Alex's question. So say you're fishing 15 to 20 feet and they're hugging bottom. Do you cast it out, let it sink to the bottom and slowly bring it back, ticking bottom as long as possible, or bring it back over their heads?
I mean, you got live scope, so do both and see which one works, baby.
Pretty much.
I'm probably going to bring it over their heads most times. I think the issue is if you don't know, like, you could pretty easily be bringing it back way too far over their heads, especially later in the year, right? Like, you could be bringing this thing back, if they're 15 feet down on the bottom and you're only letting it sink 7 feet down and cranking it on in, like, they might not come up for that. They might, but you might be a lot better off to just put it down on them. And they definitely will eat a bait on the bottom. Like, or very close to the bottom. Like, there are plenty of times where that'll work. But if I could bring it back 4 feet over their heads, I mean, oh boy, that'd be a nice way to go.
Yep.
But I think it depends day to day. I mean, that's why it's fishing, right?
Yep. Nope. I wholeheartedly agree. I can't even think of a time where I got it down on the bottom and bounced, except for that one day on Champlain. But even still, we were still swimming it either at their face or just above it. But only stripers have we gotten it to work putting it on the bottom. And those are those winter holdovers. And Andrew figured that out one year where he literally
it can definitely be a thing.
Yeah.
On the bottom. Um, I would say maybe more for smallmouth than largemouth, maybe especially in the north compared to the south. Like it seemed to me in the south, like you almost always were fishing it very mid water column. Like probably a lot of people didn't fish it high enough. Which, granted, when we first started throwing it, we didn't realize how many fish suspended and like lived it disconnected from the bottom. Um,
Right.
it kind of showed us a lot of those fish pretty, before we could see them. Um, but it kind of, I mean, it depends. And like, I would love to throw it on the bottom, you know, sometimes, but if there's wood on the bottom, I mean, no thanks.
Yeah,
I'll
dude.
keep my A rigs. Like, I don't need to break off everything I own.
Yeah.
So
We go through enough tungsten jigs as it is. What is your line choice for the A rig? Braid or fluorocarbon? Boy.
it's fluoro. I mean, we're in the 20th century now. Like when we started out throwing it, it was braid. And I think probably a lot of people have caught fish on braid, but I don't really see any reason you shouldn't use fluoro. I think there's maybe like if you're in Florida, you're fishing it around like maybe some grass-based scenarios. Uh or maybe like if you're trying to fish it super deep, uh and you want to use something like thinner, like if you're trying to risk it and throw it on like 40-pound braid super deep or something, like I could see some outside edge cases where braid
Yeah.
is still a factor, but I don't think you need to be throwing braid up here for 99% of what you're trying to do with it.
No, wholeheartedly agree. I've thrown mine on 20-pound Abrasics, and did I throw it on Tatsu? No, I didn't. Just 20-pound Abrasics. I throw it on 20-pound Red Label. Zero problems with that. I do like my 23.6-pound soft casting fluoro from Defiant Fishing a lot. It's a little heavier than is necessary, but it is definitely peace of mind, especially if I'm like, the few times I'm trying to go out there and throw it deep, a little bit deeper, like in that 38-foot range. And I don't know, just in the few instances I've tried to fish it deep around rocks, and especially on Champlain with all the zebra mussels, having that 20-pound is a lot anyway, but I feel a little bit more confident in the 23.6, and it hasn't seemed to slow down the number of bites I get on it anyway. So I try not to overthink it too much at that point. 20-pound is nice, but if you're going to throw like a little bit heavier, say 3 1/4 ounce weights and 2 3/8 ounce weights, even on the Yum Flash Mob Junior, like that weight starts to add up fast, and the 20-pound all of a sudden doesn't feel as sufficient as you would think it should. So it's doable, and you should feel fine with it. I feel great about throwing that 23.6, just a little bit heavier.
Yeah, I think 18 to 20 pound, maybe even 15 to 20 pound, is mostly where you're going to be. Like this is to me, it's the kind of thing like basically when you get done with your jig rod for the year, like you put an 8 rig on it or something like that, like for the winter. Like it's not I don't know. I think it's not bad to have like a really heavily specialized setup for it, but I also think that you can get away with a pretty broad range of stuff on
Yeah.
them.
Any action being added when reeling it in, or just straight retrieve? Any reel pumps or rod twitches?
What do you like to do?
I like to give it a little pump, almost like flaring a spinnerbait on the retrieve. And it's not much. It's literally just a little kind of kick of the wrist, just a little bit. And I'm envisioning that all those blades, all those arms as they're coming through, just kind of go, whoop, that's it, just a little bit. And it almost looks like what hoping it looks like is the bait fish are swimming along and something startles them where they're like, whoa, and then they just kind of keep on going. And that's it. That's literally all I will do. And I just try to keep it kind of random and erratic, but not often. I don't do it a ton. It's not like every 3 cranks I'm like, okay, time to pump it again. It's, maybe every like 20-ish feet. I'm like, okay, and then go.
Yeah. If I'm like fishing a target, usually I'm gonna be really steady Eddie, and I might, when a fish starts to follow it, I might kind of speed it up to take it away from them, right? Like I might just sort of increase my pace a little bit. I think I'm gonna kind of rarely like try to get really twitchy and funky like for a target. For open water or, fan casting or something where I'm not like really watching the bait religiously the whole time, I'm probably mostly reeling, and I'm going to give it like a couple of, like, I'm going to pop it like 2 or 3 times per retrieve, probably 1 or 2, like, and some of that is going to be hit a piece of grass, and so you got to pop it anyway to try and clean it. And like, I've I have probably had way more bites with it just being reeled straight than I have like trying to do crazy things. I will say I've also had days where they needed a crazy thing. Like, I guarantee you I had a couple days down in Kentucky where like you needed to like give it a little pop, and they would almost always bite it after the pop.
Yep.
And so you got to try both. I think a lot of times you can just reel it, but probably a pop every once in a while is never going to hurt anybody,
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I can think of when we were up on Champlain, last year, and we were up there in the spring. That day we did really well. There's a video up on it. We did the 4 days on there. Is day 3. If anybody wants to go back and look at that, we caught quite a few fish on the A rig, and one of the first ones ended up being a 4 1/4 smallie that I got. And I'm just slow rolling it back to the boat, and like in the last 10 feet, all of a sudden I see big friggin' smallmouth behind it. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. And I just take it, and she just like lazily turned around and started swimming right back the direction she came. And she was going slow. So I just quick flicked it out about 30 feet in front of her, started slow reeling it, and she immediately went to it, turned around, and started falling behind it. And I'm watching her, I'm like, she's gonna do the same thing. And I just give a quick little thump with the wrist, and she immediately just and crushed it. I was like, okay, that was the deciding factor. And then I did it like 2 or 3 more times after that. I'm like, okay, that was the difference. But then when we got into a spot where the wind was really ripping, we went back up there, and actually, you had mentioned August on Champlain earlier. We were up there for the Candlewood camp. All 5 days we were up there, middle of the afternoon. We friggin' crushed them on the Alabama rig in like 2 different spots. But wind was ripping, or the current was ripping in both of those cases. So that May trip, go over where the wind was going, didn't matter. Just straight line retrieve it. Didn't have to do anything fancy with it. Just get it like a couple feet off the bottom, close to the structure we're holding to, and just straight and steady, baby. And it worked great.
No doubt. There was a question from Mr. Potato here. I think that it definitely does work around bait. Like, is really good. It's a really good bait around bait in general. As far as like over deep stuff, especially targeting them, to me, a lot of times it is less efficient than some other things because it either is a little more cumbersome to cast, or a little more cumbersome to sink, or even just more cumbersome to reel back in when you miss. Not that it's a bad bait for that. It 110% works for that. One of the first alewife fish that I ever caught was on an umbrella rig, and I was trolling it on St. Catherine over open water because I was trying to figure out how to catch those dang alewife eaters because I knew they had to be out there. And I literally caught it trolling an umbrella rig over probably 40 or 50 feet. And so it's 1,000% works. It's just one of those things where I would say most times it's not the most efficient bait. But that doesn't mean that after every fish has seen a minnow 35 times next year, it's not going to come back around. Like, maybe I should be throwing chatterbaits to these fish, it's got a place, I would say, for that style. It's just one of those things where many times it's not the most efficient thing.
Yeah. Concur. Little Rich, question, what do you have for an alternate bait on the rig? Any juice you care to share? I just realized that you brought up a bait, but we really didn't talk about our favorite baits to be throwing on these. You brought up one. Was that your favorite?
I throw probably my 2 most thrown umbrella rig baits right now are probably either a Kitech, which we all know. Obviously,
Swing impact fat.
There it is. Yeah, I throw the fat usually.
Yep.
And then I've been throwing the Rapala. It's the Crush City, the Mayor, a lot lately. It comes in 2 sizes. It's like definitely more durable than a Kitech, and it is a really, really nice umbrella rig swim bait. There's just something about it. It works really good. Like, I've gained a lot of confidence since I've been throwing it. And then if you definitely like don't want to ever lose baits, those Z-Man ones are super good, but you don't ever lose. You know, you gotta, once you put them on there, you're like, all right, well, this is what I'm fishing with all day.
Yeah, fishing with it for the next 2 months.
Yeah. But I would say those are probably like my primary grouping. I know that slow flow is a really good bait. It's just one of those things where I haven't folded in the arsenal, because it's, if you got something that works, it's hard to try new stuff sometimes. And I should probably try new stuff more often.
Yeah, I will say I have used the slow flows on an A rig, and I do and don't like them. So typically when I'm throwing my A rig, I do 3 primarily Kitex, fat swing impact fats, and I'll do 2.8 inch on my dummies and 3.3 inch on my 2 reel hooks, and just kind of helps set them apart. So they're down the bottom. I forgot to silent my phone. That's my bad. They're down the bottom, so they're going to be seen first, and they're the 2 bigger presentations out of everything, so they're more likely to get bit, and it is exceedingly rare that I don't get bit on one of those. Well, I tried doing the same thing with the slow flows, and the action on the 2.85s was just off a little bit. That was like, you know what, I don't like that. But when I did all 3 of the 3.65s, they were great, and I really liked it, and they looked good. So I like them, but I feel like if I'm going to do it, I got to have the majority of them be all the right sizes. Or maybe I got to play around a little bit with the different weights that I'm throwing, and that would help make those work a lot better. But that's the only difference I've had. And if I don't use the Kitech swing impact fats, I've used the easy shiners at times, and those are pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. That's pretty much it. It's pretty much just been Kitech swing impact fats. You go through a lot. Like when you get a good bite, they tear up real fast. It is a phenomenal bait for it. And then the fact that there's so many different colors readily available, whether you're going after yellow perch bite or bluegill bite, alewife, smelt, like, doesn't matter. You can find a color that's going to work for it.
Yeah. Is Rich, is he asking about like a follow-up bait? Like, let's say the A-rig doesn't work, like what your next thing is, or like just something funky to throw on an umbrella rig? Because I pretty much just said everything I throw on an umbrella rig. I don't have any other things, but like there are, like, I would say good. Let's say the A-rig doesn't seem to be exactly the right thing. What's the next thing you throw? I think there's good options there.
Yeah.
But do we want to tackle Kevin's thing? Because I feel like that's a pretty worthwhile point.
This one, do you use different size baits in the same rig? What about different colors? Yeah, so I just touched on the different sizes. I have not used different colors on it. Andrew has not
different colors a lot.
Okay, so Andrew has, because he's like, he'll be throwing all white, and he'll look around the deck, be like, that bait still looks good enough, and he'll just grab whatever it is and throw it on there. I'm like, dude, you've got 2 whites, a yellow perch, a bluegill, and what is that, sexy shad? He's like, I don't give a shit, and he still gets bit.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of times where the color doesn't really matter. Like, you can just run like 5 different colors all around it, and like whatever, they'll eat it. A lot of times I like a bigger minnow or a bigger swim bait in the middle, especially if I'm like a place where I can go 5 wide, right? I'll do 4 like smaller ones around the edge and then a bigger one in the middle. If I'm fishing a place where I'm relying on 2 hooks, I'm usually going to do, I would say, 2 that are either the same size as my dummy or bigger than my dummy. And for different colors, a lot of times I will do my middle one a different color as well. Like I might do a sexy shad down the middle, and then the pro blue pearl or whatever it is, or pro pearl or whatever, I'll do that around the outside. I also really like, sometimes it's that blue and chartreuse one. Like, it looks very bold.
I know what you're talking about. I just bought them this year for Erie, and
it's a fantastic Great Lakes color. It's a good Oneida color. That is really good either down the middle, or sometimes even what I'll do is I might have a regular 3/8 or whatever in the middle of sexy shad, and I might just, throw a couple of the electric blue ones all around the outside. Like, I think that's a really nice little kind of, it's not really a sleeper color anymore, to be honest, but it is a pop of color that smallmouth can really appreciate. I don't know that I'd throw that for largemouth very much. For largemouth, I'm much more gonna just go with a natural shad minnow kind of color, but I'm pretty happy to throw that extra pop on smallmouth type stuff.
When you're bringing your extra pop, are you just relying on the bait, or do you ever use dye?
I mean, I've got dye in the boat, and definitely, I mean, I have definitely dipped a tail or two.
Yeah.
But I mean, if I've got the bait right there, I'll just use the bait. I think there are times where I'm like, I wish this was brighter, and sometimes I pull out my little spray bottle and sometimes I am just like, well, this bait's kind of busted up. Let me put one of these nice bright ones on.
Yeah.
I am not that particular about it.
Gotcha. Okay. Mark, our buddy there at Northeast Bass Fishing. Have you guys ever tried the Mega Bass Spark Shad on the A rig? I have, actually. And
Probably great, but tournament payouts aren't good enough.
Yeah, truth. It's not cheap to be throwing those. They're great though. They really are great. Because I got the 3-inch, but I can't remember if they have a 3.5-inch. They must. Spark Shed, yeah, I think they have one for every half-inch size. 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, and 5. Something like that.
Yeah, not based on Tackle Warehouse, but you never know.
No,
it's just 3, 4, and 5 there. But I could be super wrong.
Okay. You know what? If I was feeling like really good about the size that they wanted to eat, going 3 inches on the dummies, I'd either go 3 inches all around or 3 inches on the dummies and then 2 4-inches on the real ones. But I tell you, even throwing like a 3.8-inch Kitech, I haven't had as many bites as I do throwing a 3.3 on my reel hooks. For some reason, I just can't get that 3.8 to go as consistently as I think I should be able to.
It definitely can work. I wouldn't say change what's working for you, but certainly there have been times. But the 3.3 is such a perfect size. Like they did a really good job on that bait. It is gorgeous.
Yeah. And for its size, it holds up really well. Unlike the 2.8. God, I don't know what they did with it lately, but I cannot get those things to stay on a sniper to save my life.
Yeah, the 2.8s they're a one fish wonder for sure. But I mean, it's an amazing bait. It's just not something you gotta have plenty of them.
Yeah, truth. Yeah, that's when I buy them like 6 to 8 packs at a time per size per color.
Yeah,
I have a place over at Kitech, and it's like 60 freaking packages of one, and it's for like perch, green pumpkin, black.
How do you store your Kitechs? Because I've gone all over the place on them. Do you have like a basket that you keep in the boat or something? What's your?
I bought one of the bigger, like clear plastic totes, and it's probably, about as wide as standard keyboard. I hit it again twice, idiot. So I don't know. It's like 16 to 18 inches long. It's probably about 12 inches wide, and it's like 8 inches deep. So standing the Kitech packages straight up on their sides fits perfect. And I think I can put like 30 packs of Kitechs in there if they're all like 2.8s and 3.3s.
That's pretty slow.
So it's nice because like you butt them all up against one side, and I'll just stack them up like 2.8, 3.3 for like one color, and then repeat that for another color, and so on and so on. And then there's a nice window above them where I can put, I think I do 2.8s to one side and 3.3s to the other. So I try to usually like this time of the year, dude, if I know I'm going to go out there and throw them on the open water sniper, I'm going to try throwing them on a ball jig, and I'm going to throw them on the Alabama rig. Then I will go through and fill that tote, and I will have 4 packs per size per color. And I will do that for perch, white, green pumpkin, black, sexy shad, and then there's like just enough room to squeeze in a couple of like random ones. Like there's like a rainbow shad or something. It's kind of like a rainbow trouty kind of color, something that's just a little slightly different from the rest. But I'll use those just like on my, like just swimming a ball jig, or pinging a minnow, whatever you want to call it.
So when you throw a perch colored bait on an umbrella rig,
yep.
Are you also throwing gold blades?
Mm-mm.
Or like, are you getting fancy, or are you just straight silver?
Straight silver, and it
Okay.
works. And I've caught them on all of those colors, but that perch color from Kitech has been my best producer on it. And it's weird, like in situations where you would think it doesn't make sense because there's such contrast between those. And I'm in an area where I'm like, there's a little perch here, but that's like Champlain, like that's definitively smelt. That's definitively friggin' white perch, and that's probably alewife over there. And they still just want the yellow perch. I try not to question it. Just works. I should throw the gold more, but
it is definitely that electric blue chartreuse one. By the way,
yeah, Alex said
I'm reading in the chat.
Electric blue boogaloo.
Yeah, it's like very clearly the blue and exciting one. I haven't tried lime chartreuse. It looks good. They also make, I think there are some saltwater Kitechs, which might be a little more durable.
Yes.
That come in some pretty fun colors too, which I would say would be potentially worth a try if you were going to get, funky.
Yeah. Well, actually, funny you bring that up because I got to go buy more for going for stripers pretty soon here. So
Kitechs come in like 50 packs now or something like that.
What?
Like you can get like these huge long packs that have like, I don't think it's actually 50, but they come like you can get huge amounts.
Oh, dude. Now I need to go look because I'm actually getting kind of low on my yellow perch or my my perch ones anyway. So I got to order more, dude. If I can get like a
4 pack, 30 pack of Kitechs in one thing, it's like yay.
Okay, that's more
How
my.
dope is that? Like that's a whole tournament right there of Kitechs. You could get a little like binder situation going or something.
Yeah,
I have no idea how big they are in like person. I haven't seen one, but
I'm gonna have to buy one.
Some of my favorite colors, though.
They're gonna come in like a whole box. I'm gonna get like 4 bags of those. My wife's like, that for the whole year, but like, no, it's just for the weekend on Champlain.
Yeah, they may not come in pro packs of everything that you want them to, but it's
probably
definitely
not
an option.
Yeah, well, as long as it's like bluegill shad, that one's pretty. Bluegill flash. That one's pretty damn good color
too. That's good.
Oh yeah, it works great in so many places. Jesus, it's 9:20. We actually covered quite a bit and then some on this. So I'm pretty happy with what we were able to accomplish tonight, man. How about you?
I'm thrilled. If we're closing it out, I would love to plug like 1.5 things before we get done. But thanks so much for having me.
Go for it. Oh, dude, this is absolute pleasure. I've always enjoyed talking to you at the events we get to run into each other at, and I'm glad you're able to jump on to do this with me. And this is an absolute pleasure to have you on. But yeah, please go ahead, take the time and plug what you got to plug, man.
All right. So one thing is Lake Bombazine is one of my favorite lakes. Everybody, many people here know that. The Lake Bombazine Environmental Alliance is an organization I've started to I didn't start it, but me and other people started it. And basically our goal is to make sure there's always grass in the lake, or one of the goals of it. Yeah. And you can become a member at lakebombazine.org. And I think it's $10. It's not very much money, and it'll help us do things. It really is like a clutch part of defending the lake. Not only now, we're actually in a pretty good spot, but potentially into the future, and could be a model for other areas. Like there's not too many lake organizations that are really specifically like dedicated to keeping a lake chemical free and like being sort of cognizant of the whole operation. So I do love that. I want to just throw a plug for that. And then the other thing is, not everyone here is a tournament angler, but I do work for MLF. We run BFLs. We run the Toyota series. They have a pretty good schedule in the Northeast. It is, I am always tickled to death when people fish their tournaments. It's how I get paid. It's super key. So if you're looking for a tournament to fish, especially if you're looking for, a bigger or medium one, I would say at least look at our stuff. We've got definitely good offerings. And thanks for putting the link in the chat. I appreciate that.
No, you're welcome, man. And no, it's a good thing to put that in there for 1,000 different reasons. And I think anybody that can do that to help out, like, this is a really good positive movement. And like you said, could be precedent setting. And the fight's not over. It might be for now. Like you said, it looks good for now, but the type of people that want to do these things on any body of water have the money to try and really fight to make it happen to be the way they want it. And for no other reason than for water sports. I just don't want to touch weeds when I get in the water. And that's not a good goddamn reason to do that. So to be able to support you guys,
a lot of the issues with that are like when you just for most of our lakes around here, like there's been a lot of vegetation in them for a long time, right? And if you just, if you cut down the trees, the deer are not necessarily still going to be there. And people don't consider that when it's just water and they can look and be like, oh, it's nice, beautiful blue water. And that might be true, but boy, there's a whole thing underneath there that we've got to watch out for.
Yep, absolutely agreed. So to your point about MLF and their tournaments, I can absolutely help back that. I've now fished 2 BFLs. Yeah, last year, this year and last year. And I got to say, phenomenally well-run tournament trails. I have had 0 complaints with the way they do things. They go do, they go through pretty quick, both in the weigh-ins. I mean, the first year I did it last year, it was 120 boats and got through it faster than you could possibly imagine. This year, I think it was only 88, but really, really bad weather, just brutal wind. So I can
the Northeast Division like absolutely got screwed this year. It sucks. Like from a weather perspective, from having to cancel, like it was all around. It was like one of the worst luck years for probably any division. It was a real bummer.
Oneida got canceled, delayed, and it got pushed to the day after the Champlain event. And I was going to fish both Champlain days, the actual Champlain one, and then the makeup for the Oneida. And the Champlain day was a nightmare. And they were like, yeah, no way in hell we're doing tomorrow. So they postponed the Oneida/Champlain event yet again. And I don't even know if it actually went off like it was supposed to for the 3rd attempt for a makeup. But at any rate, absolutely awesome series. I love them. They're great one-day shootouts, whether you want to be a boater or go in as a co-angler. Also very, very easy to go in as a co-angler. And great experience if you want to go do that and have the potential to learn from somebody. And who knows what you could learn. It's Lake Champlain, right?
You could learn a lot depending on who you draw. Like, if you look at, who fishes those tournaments, I mean, you might end up riding behind Brian LaBelle. It might be Brett Carnwright. It might be Alec Morrison. Like, it might be Tom LaVictory. Like, there are some, like, super local experts, and there are also, some more regional guys who are, like, incredible to fish with, who fish those events. And next year it's only 3 fish for co-angler limits, which
huge
theoretically takes the pressure off everyone a little bit more. And especially in the Northeast, like scope is a thing. It can be hard to fish behind a guy who's doing that. So I think it probably help. I would assume it's going to help sort of like every co-angler have a good experience, as opposed to just kind of the guys who get lucky to like have got plopped down by a bunch of fish where it's real easy,
Right.
But that obviously your mileage varies on every kind of rule out there. And you got plenty of comment sections for that.
Yeah. I'm glad they're doing it. I mean, it's not a big issue now on my bigger boat, but on my Skeeter, trying to stuff 10 fish in there. Like I had an oxygenator in my live well, but not the other one. So I felt bad. A few turnips I did where I had to get a guy in there with 5 of his own fish. I'm like, I'll try and keep the pump running as much as I can, but no promises. But I will say the last 2 events I did up there, I did everything I possibly could to help my co-angler out. And I still talk to both of them. They're good dudes. So I would think
you're a better man than me on that one. I'm not. I don't. I actually don't mind fishing with co-anglers, but I think most times I'm not a good co-angler draw, is what I'll say. At least from a success standpoint, and that's although I try to be a good person.
Well, and that's I mean, that in and of itself is still valuable. Like some guys can't even manage to do that. But I go so far as like tell them all the game plan the night beforehand and be explicitly clear. And when we go there, I'm still going to put myself in position first, but I'm not going to do it in such a manner that unless it is absolutely required for me, that's going to screw them out of any opportunity to be able to fish like that area effectively as well, where we're not stepping on each other's toes. Like, if there's a way I can fish this effectively the way I need to and still give you a shot to fish something that makes sense, then I'm going to do that. I'm going to be cognizant of that. And then if I run into an issue where I got to retire or whatever, and like we're on like one particular boulder, I did that this year on the STQT. I had a fish. I missed him 2 times in a row and he busted my bait up. And I'm like, well, I looked at buddy. I was like, dude, just go for it. And first cast in, he caught it. It was like a 3-pound largie. I was like, okay, good. No, as long as somebody got that fish, this is good.
What I do then is I troll far away from that boulder so they can't cast to that and hit spot lock because I want to catch that fish. But that's, a me problem, I suppose.
Well, and it's a me problem for not doing the same thing or just saying, give me a second to gut. Because I would not have won. That fish did not make that big of a difference at all. But it would have made enough of a difference that it probably would have made me finish 5th instead of 7th. So, like, helpful? Yeah. Like, does it really matter in the end? No. Jody's co-anglers have a very high rate of zeroing.
They don't always zero. There's a lot of fish out there. Come on, Tom. But I mean, I don't think I'm easy to fish behind. I'll say that.
Hey man, as long as you're aware of it.
But you'll probably learn something for sure.
You absolutely will. Yeah,
one of my worst days as a co-angler, because I used to do it a lot, was actually one of the days that I've learned probably the most about fishing. And not to like drag this too much, but I drew Tom Hardy in a Bass Open on out of Clayton, and he caught 25 pounds that day, and I had 3 for 9 pounds on the St. Lawrence River, which is not very good in the scheme of things, right? And he torched him, and he was great. Like, he gave me a rod, and like I've given guys rods and baits and all sorts of stuff. Just you can give someone a tackle all you want. It's not necessarily gonna fix everything, but
right.
I have. He taught me that day. I learned how to throw a hair jig, right, or a marabou jig. I had a better just eyes on it, feel, understanding of that technique than I'd ever had before. And is it a number 1 tournament technique for me still? Not necessarily. I probably should fish it more, but I learned more in that day catching, 5 or 6 little fish behind a guy who was wrecking them than I literally have probably learned in like almost all the other co-angler tournaments I've fished before, like including ones that I've like done really good in. Like it can be super valuable.
Nice. Good. That's the way it should be.
Sometimes it's not, because you get behind a guy who's not on anything and you're like, well, I guess I learned what not to do today. And you try to catch one on a drop shot, because that happens too.
That's my takeaway on a really bad day is, what? At least I can say the fish are not there. So I know not to go there again.
Sometimes you run like 60 miles and you're like, they weren't there. But yeah, it happens. That's tournament fishing. You don't always catch them.
Nope. Hey, take the good with the bad, and even the bad can be good. But dude, again, thank you very much for coming on tonight. Greatly appreciate it. This was fun, and I hope everybody watching was able to learn a thing or two about A-rigs. So again, hopefully that was helpful. Anything else you want to plug before you go there, buddy?
No, I did my plugs. I'm a happy camper. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Always enjoy watching the show.
No, thanks, man. It's nice having you, like, you always being a part of it, and obviously being able to meet you in person prior to this, but then always seeing you in the chat, and then you made that comment like, let's talk A-rigs. It's like, ooh, shit, we've actually never done that. That'd be great. I'm only gonna do it if you come on. You're like, I'm game. I'm like, there we go. It's perfect.
Bring it on.
Yeah. All right. Well, for everybody that's still here, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate you all. Do us a favor before you do leave. If you have not done so yet, please leave a like, whether it's here on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're at. Doesn't matter. It all helps. Next week, we're going to have Tim Doobie on and do a little recap of the Elite Series season and touch upon something I was thinking about bringing up tonight, but decided against it with the latest changes from Bass, which affects him because he's an Elite Series angler. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but that'll be on next Wednesday, 8 p.m. like we always do right here on the channel, youtube.com/@ReelNorthernBass. Jody, thank you very much again. Everybody else, have a wonderful night. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.